Hello. Welcome to a gut reaction and review of episode 6 of Masters of the Air. Don't forget that I do a longer review on Sundays normally at 9 p.m. With History Bro, the Critical Drinker and BluCollarLoser. We do about a 2-hour review, breakdown of the episode, get into a lot more detail. This is just my initial thoughts, having just seen the episode. And what I thought about it. Well, episode 6 is a mixed bag. We kind of knew from the previews that it wasn't going to be a mission episode, and I state for the record again, I don't mind that. I don't mind episodes with no action, because I know there's always going to be plenty of action in the show. So I don't have a problem with episodes that focus more on character development or just the more mundane stuff of war that's still quite important sometimes to put under a dramatic microscope. So this episode is one of 2 narratives, basically. We follow Nate Mann's character, who plays, let me just get the name of his character correct, Lieutenant Robert Rosie Rosenthal. Here he is. We follow him and his crew, basically taking some R&R, rest and recuperation, at a place called the Flak Shed, which is kind of a sort of respite weekend getaway place where pilots can... What the hell is going on with these lights? Sorry, let me just adjust this. It's like I've got a carnival. There we go. Right, okay. So... wondered what on earth was happening there for a minute. Yeah, it's like a place where air crews can go and rest and recuperate for a few days. And in this case, because the casualties were so high and they were the only plane to return from the Munster raid, they were ordered to go there. And Rosie, played by Nate Mann, doesn't particularly want to stay there. He wants to get back into action. He feels like he's done 3 missions on the trot. He's got a good rhythm going and feels this is going to sort of disrupt his rhythm, so to speak. The other half of the narrative follows basically what happens to Callum Turner's character in the show. He has crashed, of course, on the same raid that Nate Mann came back from. And his character is seen escaping and evading or attempting to German civilians and so on. Johnny Buckhagen, or Bucky as he's known in the show. That storyline for me is always a lot less interesting, I've got to be honest. But there is a scene where he, along with some of his fellow airmen, are being taken through a town that's recently been bombed by the British. Cued line of dialogue. Well, at least they hit something. That's one of 3 stabs at the British in this episode. I'll come back to that. And Turner, or Bucky's character, as they were getting taken through this bombed out town, I did actually say to myself, if this was real, these people would be lynched. And lo and behold, it's like the writer was listening, because seconds later, the crowd of civilians who are clearing up after the bombings see these pilots being taken through. They turn on them. Their German escorts don't really do anything. And yeah, shit happens. I won't get into spoilers now, because most people probably won't have seen this episode yet. So we follow Bucky from the point of his capture to the point that he ends up in Stalag 3, which is a prisoner of war camp run by the Luftwaffe exclusively for Allied airborne or pilots, and that's where they go. And I think there's going to be a fair bit of time spent in that prison camp in episode 7. Remember, there are only 3 episodes left for this show, just 3. So it's going to be interesting to see what we get in those 3 episodes. The running time of this episode is slightly longer than the others. Most of them have been around 41 to 42 minutes. This one was around 50 and a half. And it was better for that. I don't understand why we have such a short running time for these episodes. We know a lot of other scenes have been filmed. We've got somebody on my Sunday review, the Inside Man, who worked on the show mainly in post-production, so he saw a whole load of other edits and things. I don't understand what's happened to this material and why these episodes can't be longer. It's not like they've got to be shoehorned in between news at 10 and something else. Yeah, I'm afraid there's at least 3 occasions of Brit bashing. We'll talk about that in more detail on Sunday. Drew this week was another emotional war melodrama episode with a distinct lack of aviation combat. Yeah, like episode 4. It is. It had things in it that annoyed me, but not as much as episode 4. Yes, I'm going to say it before someone else does. All the chimneys were correct. You guys are fast. I didn't have a chance to watch it yet. Yeah, Vincent, we'll do. I'm trying to avoid spoilers, mate. Anyway, so I'm not going to get into spoilers. We'll do a more in detailed review. This is just my gut reaction. Overall, this episode is okay. It's got some really good scenes. It's got some really moving stuff. Most of those scenes are that are good. Partly involve Callum Turner during the time he's taken through the town that's been bombed. And then the scenes involving Nate Mann and his crew, when they're at the respite weekend, those scenes were very believable and they were interesting to see how he was coping with all that. Anthony Boyle, who plays one of the other main characters, we also see his character sort of taking a bit of time out. He goes to Oxford, which is the third narrative of the episode. And he ends up rather unrealistically, and I haven't been able to verify if this was true, being roomed with a female officer who presumably is part of the intelligence community, because we're not sort of allowed to find out what she does. I'm pretty sure there's a photograph of that actress in here. Yeah, here we go. This is the one I was looking for. So they end up spending some time together. Belle Powley is an actress I'm very familiar with, whose work I've seen before. She's also an absolutely lovely person in real life. Haven't had the opportunity to work with her yet, but I know loads of people that have, and they all say really nice things. I've got to say that Anthony Boyle is a class actor. He does an absolutely fantastic job in this part. And I think a weaker actor would not have been able to get as much out of his scenes. It's always in the looks. It's always in the things he doesn't say or the way he looks at certain times. One thing you can't bash about this show is the acting. The standard of the acting in Masters of the Air is really high, in my opinion. Some of the dialogue maybe less so, but on the whole, the acting is really high. The dialogue in this episode, some of it's good and some of it's not. The dialogue there's a scene when we were talking about Brit bashing. Hi, Vulcan Lives. Good to have you. There's a scene with a load of British officers, and again, I'm going to avoid spoilers, but where it's, they say that classic line of, well, you know what they say about the Americans, they're oversexed, overpaid, and over here, old boy. And it really is like that. And then I don't like the way they approach our ladies. I mean, it's all well and good if they're chasing after chambermaids and barmaids, but they're going up and proposing to Lady Grenfell. And there's all this sort of stuff, And then there's this very kind of wedged, forced scene around that issue of class and, the upper class taking advantage of the lower class domestic help in sexual situations. And yes, all of that went on. And yes, there are lots of shows about that, upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey covers this topic, of course. I just, it just felt a bit unnecessary here to kind of have that social statement wedged into this scene. I'll talk about it more on Sunday at 9 o'clock when we do our bigger show about this episode. That bit for me really just stood out as it just felt a bit uncomfortable. It just felt sort of very forced social messaging, and I'm just not really sure we needed it in a show about this. The other thing was that with the exception of the portrayal of this character who Powley plays, there was massive reinforcement of the negative British stereotypes. And yes, their officers did all come from the upper classes of society, and yes, that did naturally have social barriers and stigmas and all of that came with that. Yeah, sure, all of that stuff is true, but I just sometimes it's more nuanced than that, and I just felt the writing around the kind of American and British rivalry. If you saw a show called We'll Meet Again, which is about American bomber crews living in Norfolk, and it's really about what happens with the crews when they're back at base, and what goes on with them and the local British people and the rivalries and stuff like that. The whole series, by the way, of We'll Meet Again is on YouTube. You can watch it. It's very, very dated, I'll warn you now. Shot with broadcast cameras. I don't think it was shot on film, and it doesn't look great. But they did in that show, even though the Americans and the British are bashing heads a lot, there were a lot of scenes where they were getting along, or they found common ground. And I just feel like, I mean, I hope that there's a scene like that towards the end of the war where we see British and American pilots, shake hands. Maybe we'll get a bit of that stuff in the prisoner of war camp. But at the minute, every time we see a British officer in the show, all he does is bitch about the Americans, and it's like it's every time. And I get that the rivalry is there. Of course, it was there. It was huge. It was big, and they're right to show it. But could you show something else as well? It's just every scene, and if the British are mentioned, it's always in a negative context. And this isn't just because I'm British. I mean, I consider myself more Danish than anything, but it just gets a bit tired. It's like, is Mel Gibson producing this? What's going on here? I thought this was Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. So some of that stuff doesn't land too well. Some of it's fine. I can get the idea of British and American rivalry. I like the TV show Piece of Cake. That was very good. Yes, I've got the DVD of that for showing how some RAF could be scumbags. But this is a USA pro-segregation, which also bombed civilians. I mean, yeah, that's right. And I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, that there was a battle. There was a place called Bamber Bridge, and the Americans, the American white soldiers there, didn't want, particularly the officers, didn't want the Negro soldiers, African American as we call, but that's the term used back then, didn't want them frequenting the pubs in the town. So they actually were trying to force the landlords to put up a sign that said whites only. And this resulted in a massive fracas in the town, and the British got very annoyed and said, it's up to us to decide who can come and drink in our pubs. And an actual fight broke out, during which shots were exchanged. I'm not kidding. And one person was killed, and American MPs came down to turf out the black soldiers from the bars and stuff like that. So, if you're going to sort of show that all British airmen are snobs and anti-American, I feel you can be touching on some other subjects as well, rather than sort of over glorifying everything. I mean, also when we look at all the American characters, Bucky is really the one who's a bit out there. He's a bit of a drunk. He's a bit of a ladies' man. He's on a bit of a death wish, but you kind of like him, and that's fine. Everybody else, with the exception of Anthony Boyle's character and Nate Mann's, I think they're the three leads. Austin Butler's character, we never really get to know him. We may by the end of the show, but yeah. Northern English Bastard, one of my fellow YouTuber collaborators, just popping in. I hated how the Brits were snobby arseholes in episodes 2 or 3. Wouldn't it make sense to help them and advise them in order to keep more men alive? Yeah. Not all soldiers were perfect, but it still doesn't excuse disrespectful portrayals of soldiers giving their lives. Look, I'm not against these scenes of rivalry. I'm just like, every scene is a bit much. It's a bit much to always have the Brits being portrayed in this really negative light. Obviously, this character played by Belle Powley is sort of, I guess, is supposed to be a counterbalance to that. But for her, there's a scene where she kind of dresses down a senior officer in a social environment. I'm just telling you, in 1940s England, no matter what position she had in Allied intelligence, that would not happen. It just wouldn't happen. It just sort of, yeah. So how long have I been on? 17 minutes. Okay. I'm not going to stay on too much longer about this. Overall, I'm going to have to watch this again before I rate it out of 10. So I'm going to hold off giving my rating until we do the show on Sunday, 9 o'clock on Sunday, UK time, 5 p.m. East Coast. We did it earlier last week, but we're back to our 9 o'clock schedule with History Bro, the Critical Drinker, BluCollarLoser as my lineup of guests. May have one or two others. Yeah, I think Northern. I think you're coming on Sunday as well. I think you're coming on, if I remember rightly. Yeah, so I'm really torn on this one. It's got some great stuff. I really like Anthony Boyle. I really like Nate Mann. These are fine actors. These are really well cast individuals who do a superb job. Callum Turner, very good in the show as well. This is a scene. This is actually a scene from episode 6 where their crew are playing a card game. See, where this show is at its strongest is when it's showing the things that these guys did to cope. And so there's a great line in it where Nate Mann's character is saying in overview, in voiceover, so we all told stories again and again and again. Some of them were true, most of them were not, but we said whatever we had to say to get it out our system and move on. Words to that effect. And that scene is really powerful. There's another scene where he catches sight of a young airman breaking down, crying in the garden, you know, in this place where they're recovering and recuperating. And you want him to go and talk to that guy. And if this was all Hollywood, he would go and talk to him, and there would be a scene where they go, "Oh, it's all, you know, it's all going to be okay, soldier," and or airman, and that kind of thing. They resist doing that. He you can see he wants to go and say something, but he doesn't know what to say, and ultimately he walks away. And in the 1940s, that is a very realistic depiction. It was not a time where men talked about their feelings and hugged each other. You know, that didn't happen back then, or if it did, it was extremely rare. So I'm glad that kind of stuff isn't included. But thank you very much for saying that, Judy. I much appreciate it. And Vulcan, yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. do sub and share the channel and all that, you know. Got lots more of this kind of stuff to come. Yeah, and this again is from episode 6 with Anthony Boyle. So is this, where he's dancing with Belle Powley. I mean, I'm not going to say what happens with these characters, but I'm glad that they resisted embracing certain tropes, and this is where the writing is good. But forgot to mention this. The episode does open with a line, and I shit you not, it is this line: For you, Americana, the war is over. And I was like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh no, they didn't. So that's gonna lead to a huge number of comments quoting that line and saying how cliched it is. Well, okay, how does something become a cliche? It becomes a cliche because it's said often, and therefore it's repeated often and overused in a cultural context. Therefore, it becomes a cliche. But cliches all start from a basis of some truth. And I suspect that line was said to a lot of people, and it was probably one of the, you know, German soldiers or Germans in general are not going to know a lot of English, but they'll be taught a few things, and that might have been a line that a lot of people said. But it's still, because it's been so overused, it still was like, oh, when you hear it, it's a bit like, for you, the war is over. I was like, yeah, okay. Could we have said that differently? I don't know. Hand to hock, you know. That's usually what you get. Yeah, I really like this actor as well, Elliot Warren. He's really good. Rafferty Law, Jude Law's son, exceptionally good in this show. So again, you know, standard of acting, can't fault the acting in this show. I want that jacket, you know. I really want that jacket. I wonder how much that will cost me. More than I can afford, I'm sure. Yeah, so all of this stuff, all of these scenes, I really liked. Really like all of this stuff. You did get a bit of a flutter in your heart in the final 10 minutes when you learned some new stuff. I mean, I knew it was coming personally, but so, you know, there are some scenes in this episode that got me in the feels a little bit, that drew me in emotionally. And I mean, for any show to achieve that these days is no small feat. So, there's one other thing I forgot to mention. There's an interrogation scene in this episode with Callum Turner and a German Luftwaffe officer. And I don't know the name of the actor who plays the German, but let's find out and give him a shout out because he deserves one. I don't know if he's actually German, but he certainly was very convincing. I don't think we're going to see him again, so he'll only be in one episode, so he'll be way down the cast list. I mean, maybe he's in 2, but I would think probably, I mean, we might see him in 1 more. I guess it's possible, but I think probably just the 1 episode. But let's just check to see if there's any German character names here. He'll be something like Luftwaffe officer, or I think he did introduce his character name in that scene. But he basically sits down with Callum Turner's character and is trying to sort of extract some information about him. Now, he might be Major Flescher. That sounds quite German. But I don't know if that's. Let's have a look. Is that the actor? No, that's definitely not him. Definitely wasn't him. You got German man, German woman. It's not any of these. Luftwaffe guard. It's definitely not. He wasn't a guard. He was a officer. So, well, if anyone in the chat knows the name of the character, if you've seen the episode, let me know. Well, what I wanted to say about that guy is I thought he was really good, which is why I want to give him a shout out. We've got various other Luftwaffe guards here. You'd think he was... here we go. So he could be this guy, Lieutenant Ulrich Husmann. Let's have a look. Lewis Hoffman. That looks like him. Yes, this is him. So he grew up in Cologne. Yeah, I thought he was a German actor. Good. I'm glad he's a German actor, because he's also in The Light We Cannot See. Just see, there might be a still of him from Masters of the Air here somewhere, I'm wondering. No, but he looks pretty similar to this. He's great in this. Really good. Kind of a cool scene. Kind of tries to trick up Bucky into giving more information than he's willing. It's just a good scene. It's well done. It's believable. It's not too over the top. And I just liked it. I liked the back and forth between them. Yeah, it was good. So that was another really good scene in the episode. Yeah, if you haven't seen he's in Land of Mine as well, when they're removing landmines from the Danish coast. That's a very, very good post World War II movie. Pretty emotionally draining. So this kid's he was in Dark. He's that kid in Dark. Okay, yeah, I thought I'd seen him in a few other things. This kid's a really good actor. And again, in a show like Masters of the Air, you've got to you've got to make sure the guts of your cast are good. And that's one thing. I've said it twice on this stream already that you can't fault the show for is the acting. I think the acting is first class. Yeah, there are some people that are stronger than others, and some people get given very cliched dialogue. So obviously that can't be helped. But there's no one that I would turn around and say, oh, he gave a weak performance or they gave an unbelievable performance. So let me know your comments in the chat. Have you seen this episode yet? There's 15 people watching. Thanks for dropping by and spending some time with me. Have you seen this episode yet? If you have, what do you think of it? If you haven't seen this episode yet, how are you enjoying or not enjoying Masters of the Air so far? People are very, very, very divided on this show. Now, we waited a very long time to see this show. Don't forget that Band of Brothers was September 2001. The Pacific, I think, came out, was it 203 or 204? It was certainly a few years later. And then we had a 10-year gap. They tried to get Masters of the Air off and fully funded several times before that. At one point, it was called the Mighty Eighth. Another time, it was called the 100th. Went through various other titles before finally being called Masters of the Air. Ruben says, for me, it was better than episode 4. Yeah, it was. Because I felt that the errors in episode 4 were far greater. Here, it's... I think the biggest problem with this episode is it's got some cliched dialogue, and it just a lot of reinforcing of stereotypes, which I wish they had sort of not embraced. I guess it's got some really good character development. It's got some really good emotional scenes, and there's some nice direction. Some beautiful photography, and some very chilling moments, really chilling moments. So yes, it's way stronger than episode 4, which I just found was a really jarring and a bit of a naff episode. Yeah, I mean, I guess on this episode, I'm kind of leaning towards maybe 7 out of 10. Like for me, episode 5 was a 10. Episode 5 was a 10. Episode 3 was a 9. Episode 1 was an 8. Episode 2 was an 8. Episode 4 was a 6. So yeah, I guess I'm leaning towards a 7 on this one. If we didn't have all of the cliches, I'd lean into an 8 for it. I don't mind that it's not an action episode. I don't mind that. Anyone else want to comment before I wrap this up? Chuck a comment in the chat. I know there's a bit of a time delay between me talking and you hearing this. There's 14 people watching. Tell me what you think about the show. Are you liking it? Are you disappointed? Are you kind of holding out your verdict until you've seen everything? I wanted to break this down as I went along because I've waited so long for it. And for anybody who's been following my own social media for a long time, you'll know I'm a filmmaker and I've tried to get my own show about the European sort of war effort off the ground for forever. I don't know if this is going to make it easier, Masters of the Air, or harder to get that production commissioned. But I have had some people ask about it and wanted to see pitch decks and things. So hey, you never know. I've been trying it for so long. I'm kind of like, yeah, sure, whatever. And until a huge amount of money arrives in the bank and someone says, right, you're starting filming next week, I don't assume these things are ever going to happen. So 50-50, I can't lie, the Mighty Eighth and their air crews deserve better than this. I think it's showing the courage and the sacrifice of the 8th Air Force well, and what they went through. Pickle Mate, we've done that already twice, and that was just to get funding for the trailer and pilot. The kind of money that we would need is difficult. Okay, a couple of other comments coming in, and do put your comments because I'm interested. I'm genuinely interested in what you think about this show. If you hate it, you don't like it, that's fine. Let me know. Fifian Crilly, I'm guessing that's a Welsh name. I thought the last 10 minutes of this episode was excellent. I was on my feet screaming. Hate the two-dimensional portrayal of the Brits. Yeah, the last 10 minutes of the episode were great. Hi Judy. Yeah, thanks. It's a shame those stills of paratroopers looked great. I'll endeavour to pick up one of the scripts off Amazon that you showed. Well, what she's talking about is 3 of the 6 in total for Paratrooper, which is the European equivalent of Band of Brothers that I've been writing, creating, trying to get financial backing for a long time. Shame I don't know that couple that just won £63 million on the Euro. They've got a few quid to spend. If anyone knows them and they might want to finance that or the Pegasus Bridge movie, put them in touch with me. But the Paratrooper books, there are 3 of them. They're out on hang on, let me just use this on a different thing. They're out on to buy now. If you want to read the scripts, please feel free. I've had somebody troll me on there already. There's nothing like getting trolled by another frustrated filmmaker. Always fun. They're out on Amazon.com and on Amazon.co.uk. If you're in America, don't order them from Amazon.com from .co.uk because it will take absolutely ages for them to arrive. These are all of the ones here. I'll share this for a second. Hold on, let me close this. I've got way too many windows open right now. I'll put this here. So This is the pilot. This is episodes 1 and 2, and we did quite a bit of filming for the pilot, which is why I've got so many stills, which is why I've got the tank attack on the front, which actually happened. But the first 2 scripts I actually published were 7 and 8, because 7 and 8 are quite contained. One of them is all set in Crete and told from the perspective of a German Fallschirmjäger, German paratrooper, which I thought was a really unique perspective to tell. I just didn't think anyone would ever do an episode entirely from the German point of view, and I just thought that would be interesting to explore. And the Fallschirmjäger on Crete, they were involved in some really terrible atrocities against Greek civilians who fought tenaciously during the Battle of Crete. They killed a lot of Germans, and as was their right, because their homes were being invaded. And then that's episode 7. Episode 8, which is The End of Innocence, is set during the Battle of Arnhem. That's told entirely from the point of view of a young kid. Episodes 1 and 2 at the top, that's set over just before and then during D-Day. But it really tells the story of the first black paratrooper in the British Army, Sidney Cornell, how he came to join up and what happened to him. Episodes 3 and 4, which are published fairly recently, these are 2 episodes that cover, one of them covers the raid on the radar station, which was the first official operation of the parachute regiment. There was Operation Colossus, which was before that, but that was not under the regiment banner. And then episode 4 covers which one's that? Episode 4 is again with it's set in Italy, and it covers Primasol Bridge. So every episode of Paratrooper follows one main character. So the pilot, Sidney Cornell, the German episode, the young German paratrooper, Frost is the main character of episode 3, of course, who was played by Anthony Hopkins in Bridge Too Far. Anthony Frank, who was one of Frost's men, is the main character in episode 4. There's also a Canadian episode. There's a Polish episode, which come later in the show. They're both set during, the Polish one is set during Arnhem, told from a completely different perspective. And the Canadian episode is set during the jump over the Rhine. And that's told by a guy who got a VC, who was incredibly brave. So again, another character. Episode 10 kind of wraps the whole series up. Shows what kind of happens to the men as they come home, that kind of thing. Anyway, but sorry, so that's to answer Judy. That's a rather long-winded way of answering your question. Yeah, I mean, there's reasons I could give why I'm not being given the money to make that show about the UK's first black paratrooper, and I have put it in front of as many people as I can. Yeah. And I saw, by the way, when we were auditioning for the trailer scenes for the pilot, I saw the cream of black British talent for that role. They all came in and read for me, and these young men, they were fucking amazing. Their acting ability was just incredible. These guys. And I saw about 4 or 5 of them that I knew from various other things. And I was thinking, God, I want to work with all of these. It was like I've never seen such high standard of acting in a single audition as I saw that day. Anyway, let's go back to Masters of the Air. Sorry for that diversion, but I'm sure you found it interesting if you're interested in World War II. Still 16 people watching. I'd like to hear some more comments about the show in general. If you haven't seen episode 6 yet, I'd like to hear some more comments about what you think about Masters of the Air. We are doing a longer stream about this on Sunday at 9 o'clock. It's now 20 to 5 on Friday, and I'm involved in recording a charity single. Believe it or not, I'm going to be singing because I'm doing a charity single for the postmasters to do with the Horizon post office scandal. Again, if you follow my social media, you'll know that I wrote the play about that. That was one of the other things I was doing in the last couple of years. We put it on stage, and I'm going to be singing about that in a little bit at 6 o'clock with a load of other people online. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but it's going to be interesting. Could I do a gut reaction on Catch-22, the movie from 1970? Can you sing? Yes, I can sing. My birth father had a number one, by the way, number one hit single. The Catch-22 movie from the 1970. I probably would be more interested in doing a review of the Catch-22 miniseries that dropped a couple of years ago, which produced and starred George Clooney. A lot of people didn't seem to see that. I don't know why people didn't seem to pick up that. Zed Actual, mate, thank you for commenting. I'm interested in hearing from people who haven't commented yet. It's a 6, and that could be generous. Yeah, mate, I'm sort of 7 out of 10 on this at the minute. I need to rewatch it, to be honest. I said that at the beginning of the stream. I want to rewatch it before I give my final verdict. I always rewatch the show on Sunday right before we do our more in-depth review. Yeah, I mean, that was... Who is this female officer? Is she SOE? Yeah, I thought, you know, I'm important, but I can't tell you why I'm important. It was all a bit... I don't know if any of that storyline's based on any reality at all, but it didn't feel very real. I didn't mind the scenes with the two of them alone. I thought those scenes were fine. And Belle Powley's a great actress. She's perfect for that sort of role. Yeah. Right. Cheers, said Actual. Thanks for popping in. Really appreciate you popping in and commenting. Got a dash. Yeah, well, I think I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. Don't forget, there's a longer stream of this on Sunday at 9 o'clock with the Critical Drinker, myself, History Bro, and BluCollarLoser, and we have the Inside Man on every stream. He worked on the show, and he was also on Band of Brothers every episode. So yeah, mate, I'm front row couch. Nice to have you on. By the way, if you're a fellow YouTuber, buddy, and you ever want to come on the channel, do a collab, let me know. You can contact me via the Outcast Facebook page. But I agree. I had a big issue with that, with this episode. The British are mentioned 3 times, and every time they're a bunch of, you know. So I just thought, yeah, unless they're female love interest, I just thought that it would be nice to have seen one scene at that respite center where you have what I wanted to see. I'll say this before I end this tonight. What I wanted to see in this episode, and I think it would have been really nice if we'd got it, is a scene with some British airmen and some American airmen comparing notes, talking about what, you know, their respective nighttime, daytime bombing, etc. I would have liked to have seen them sitting down and just talking airman to airman. Forget all this rivalry shit. And, you know, just not have the British portrayed as a bunch of condescending wankers every time they're in the episode. And I really wanted to see a scene. It could have just been a scene with, you know, Roberts, Nate Mann's character. Could have just been a scene with him and one other British airman. It didn't need to be a whole group where, you know, there may be just one of them sitting on his own. Yeah, how you doing? And can't wait to get back. Yeah, me too. Don't know why they send us here. I just want to get back in. The sooner we finish this, the sooner we can go home. What's the nighttime? What are the nighttime raids like? You know, pretty bad. What are the daytime ones like? pretty bad. You know, you could just have that, just simple dialogue like that, where they're saying so much to each other with a look. You know, good luck. Yeah. Really hope to see you on the other side. Yeah, you too. You know, and just have that acknowledgement of, yeah, we're both in it and it's hard. But there's that respect there. I would have liked to have seen that mutual respect between the air crews, the British and the Americans. Maybe we'll get that. Maybe we'll get that in another, maybe we'll get that in episode 9 to kind of show that they're allies. But I completely agree with Front Row Couch. I think the show just constantly putting the Brits in a bad light unless they're, female love interest to be had by the Americans, just does feel a bit naff. And I'll talk more about that on Sunday. But I really would like to see that scene between the just between an American and a Brit. I'd love to see that, and have that mutual respect. All right, okay. Well, I think that's it from me. Listen, there's been 13 people watching. I really appreciate that. Thanks for spending time hanging out with me. If you're interested in more stuff to do with the industry and inside stuff, go on my playlist and look at my industry interviews. I interviewed the director of Tremors last week. I had producer Galen Hurd, who was producer of Aliens, Terminator 2, The Abyss. She came on that stream as a guest. I've got other streams like that coming. I'm doing a special on 5 Days at Memorial, which is also an Apple Plus drama show that is also exceptionally good. About the Memorial Hospital in Hurricane Katrina. I've just finished watching it. It's a first-class show, one of the best I've ever seen. Thoroughly recommend you watch it if you haven't seen it. I've got some of the cast of that coming to talk to me when I do a special show about it. In the meantime, I will be back with the Chew the Fat full episode on this at 9 o'clock on Sunday. I'm going to be on Uninspired Reviewers channel tomorrow. We're doing a special on John Muffat's Hard Boiled, and John Woo's Hard Boiled, and then I've also got the Nielsen ratings 10 o'clock every Tuesday, where I just do my general catch up about stuff I've seen. So thanks very much for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff, and really appreciate the support for the channel. I really do. Until then, I'll see you again on Sunday at 9 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. East Coast.